What happens when a black engineer stops to help an elderly woman and ends up in handcuffs instead of being thanked? What unfolded next shook the entire city and changed the rules of the game forever. Michael Brooks always used to say, if you start your day doing a good deed, the world at least owes you a decent cup of coffee. That morning, he got no coffee. What he got instead was a pair of handcuffs, a bruised sense of dignity, and a first-hand tutorial on how racial profiling works, live and in daylight, right there on the side of a busy road. The sun was merciless that day, beating down like it had a personal grudge against black skin. Michael was on his way home from a short shift at the engineering firm, already thinking ahead. Swing by Mama's house, grab some sweet rolls for the kids, maybe even catch the ball game without guilt. A peaceful plan, too peaceful to survive in reality. 20 yards ahead of him, an old white Honda jerked to the side, coughed once, and hissed out a cloud of smoke like it just gave up on life. Standing beside it, in a bright print dress and with silver hair twisted tight against the heat, was a woman clearly out of place in the chaos of traffic. Horns blared, drivers swerved, and a few yelled as they sped past. Nobody stopped. Nobody but Michael. He flicked on his hazard lights, pulled his dusty Toyota to the shoulder, and got out. No cape, no sirens, just a black man in slacks and a tucked-in shirt, walking with purpose. "Ma'am, you all right?" he asked, soft enough not to startle her. In this world, even kindness in a black package could make folks flinch. "My engine died. And I think the tire too," she stammered, her voice rattled more from fear than heat. Michael took one look and saw the problem. Flat tire, radiator steaming like a tea kettle left too long. And she, teetering at the edge of a busy lane like she didn't belong to either side of the curb. "Let's get you in the shade first," he said, guiding her gently to a patch of grass. "I got this?" This was the kind of moment his mama used to praise. "That's what good men do, son," she'd say. Funny, he wondered what she would have said about what happened next. He had just started working the jack under the wheel, his dress shirt already damp at the back, when it came. The scream of a siren that stabbed the air like broken glass. A squad car swerved up behind his Toyota, light slicing the heat into pieces. Michael looked up, wiped his forehead, and took a careful step back. It was instinct. That kind of siren doesn't ask, it demands. Two white officers spilled from the car with the urgency of men who thought they were running toward danger. One had his hand already near his holster. The other squinted like Michael had ruined his breakfast. "Hands up, now!" the shorter one barked. "Drop the tool!" Right, because a lug wrench in the hands of a black man automatically becomes a weapon of mass destruction, especially when he's helping someone's grandma. "Officers, Michael began, but his voice wasn't quick enough. "Hands on the hood, now!" He complied. Of course he did. He had two choices: raise his voice and become a headline, or keep his head down and hope to live to see his daughter's recital. The woman rushed forward, waving her arms. "He's helping me. I called for a tow, but he stopped first. He's fixing my car." The officers didn't even glance at her. "Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you." "But he's not doing anything wrong." "Step back or you'll be detained as well." Michael felt the cuffs snap around his wrists like the punchline to a sick joke. The officer twisted just enough to make the metal bite into bone. Meanwhile, the other one ransacked his car like he was expecting to find a kidnapped senator in the trunk. "Gloves, a wrench, safety vest," the taller one muttered. "Wow," Sherlock Holmes would be proud. "It's a car problem," the woman cried. "He didn't touch me, didn't threaten me. He helped me." "Ma'am," one officer said, not looking up, "you are not required to speak." Michael stood there, shackled to his own good deed, sweat stinging his eyes. Not from the sun, but from humiliation. Cars passed, a few slowed down. Someone filmed, someone laughed, someone rolled their window up. He'd been raised right, told to work twice as hard, be twice as polite, dress clean, speak soft. "They won't bother you if you're better," his father used to say. But here he was, a college-educated engineer, community volunteer, and father of two, handcuffed on the shoulder of a highway for being helpful while black. 40 minutes passed. No apology, no explanation. When they finally uncuffed him, it was with the dry shrug of bureaucratic indifference. There was a report about a possible stolen vehicle. Just standard protocol. Oh, sure. James Bond in khakis and dress shoes, committing grand theft auto with a jack and a bottle of water. Michael got back into his car, hands shaking. Not with fear, but the kind of fury that digs deep and plants itself like a weed. He didn't drive to his mother's. He didn't go home. He turned onto a quiet street parked in front of the community center where he taught weekend robotics to kids who looked just like him and sat there in silence. Then he pulled out his laptop. No theatrics, no rants. Just a photo, a caption. Helping a stranded elder, ended up detained. No apology, no crime, just black. Within the hour it had taken off. People shared, people commented, people screamed. By sundown, the local paper called. By midnight, he'd declined 3 TV interviews. He wasn't looking for fame. He just didn't want to feel invisible. At 1:14 a.m., his phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one message. You're making noise. Some things are better left alone. Michael stared at it, then chuckled. Not the kind of laugh that lightens the room. The kind that comes from knowing exactly where the line is and deciding it needs to be crossed anyway. He closed his laptop, stood up, and said aloud, quietly but with steel in his voice, I started this story trying to do good, but now I'm finishing it as a man who won't back down. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolds. The next morning, just as the sun dragged itself over the horizon like it hadn't had a good night's rest, Michael was already standing at the entrance of the school. In one hand, he carried a box of cookies for his robotics students, the same kids who thought he was some kind of genius with a heart. On his face, though, was that kind of stillness that didn't mean calm. It meant fury that hadn't chosen its words yet. He had hoped, naively perhaps, that today might feel different, that the air might taste less bitter, that someone somewhere would look at him and see a man, not a headline. But no. Instead of a smile from the school security guard or the usual nod of respect from the front office receptionist, he was met by the principal himself, standing stiff as a broomstick and looking like he'd just swallowed something sour and couldn't find the exit wound. Michael, he exhaled like someone trying to push out courage. Do you have a minute? Oh, he had a minute. Probably a few. Michael stepped aside with the kind of composure that made kids glance twice as they passed, some with admiration, some with confusion, a few with that wary distance their parents had likely passed down through Facebook posts and dinner table whispers. The principal's office smelled like every underwhelming meeting in corporate America. Too much artificial lemon spray and just enough anxiety to curdle your thoughts. The man across the desk folded his hands like a priest in confession, except this wasn't a prayer, it was a warning dressed in politeness. You understand, of course, that your recent post, the situation, the news coverage, it's created a bit of a stir, he began. Michael didn't flinch. I posted the truth, he said evenly, unless we've decided this is a school for silence, not science. It's not about punishment, the principal rushed to say, like the words were jumping out ahead of him. But some parents are concerned. Given the visibility and the reactions online, we think it's best to temporarily suspend your involvement with the after-school programs, just until things settle. Settle? Michael leaned forward. You think the problem is me? Not the fact that a man got handcuffed for helping an elderly woman on the side of the road? The principal swallowed like the air got thicker. It's temporary, he mumbled, just until the attention fades. Michael laughed, and it wasn't a friendly sound. Temporary is what they say right before they forget you ever existed. He stood up, nodded once, no handshake, and walked out. Just as he stepped back into the light of day, his phone buzzed. Same unknown number. New message. Keep feeding the flames, and don't be surprised when you get burned. Michael stared at the screen, looked up at the sky, then back at the screen. He whispered to himself, soft, steady, final. Let it burn. He didn't drive home. Instead, he made his way straight to City Hall, where a chain-smoking journalist with a notepad for a brain and gravel for a voice had been trying to get him on camera since the post went viral. "You sure you want to go public?" she asked, eyeing him like she'd seen too many good men devoured by bad systems. "Stories like this? They make noise, and noise attracts filth." "I'm a black man in America," Michael said. "Filth's been part of my wardrobe longer than this jacket." 2 days later, the footage hit the airwaves. Black and white. No dramatic music. Just facts. The shot opened on Michael, kneeling on hot asphalt, wrench in hand. A white officer's hand hovered near his holster like a reflex. Then the slow pan up to Michael's face. Not angry, not begging. Just full of the quiet dignity that made people sit straighter in their seats. The internet exploded. 1 million views in a day. Petitions, panel invitations, messages from groups he'd never heard of, but who seemed to know his whole life story. People called him brave, a hero. Some said inspiration. Others called him a threat to order. And as it always goes, when you speak up, someone always wants you to shut up. First, his house lost power, no notice. Every other house on the block still lit up like Christmas. His? Dark as denial. Then the mail stopped coming. No bills, no flyers, not even junk. Day 3, the police asked him to come in, just to clarify some details. "Welcome to the club. You angered the wrong people." A young officer, barely out of training, sat across from him with a fake smile and a script rehearsed to sound casual. "We just have a few questions, routine stuff." "Sure. Have you ever had any past citations? Did you raise your voice at the officers? Why didn't you show your ID right away?" Michael answered every question, calm, clear, director. "Number, I didn't raise my voice. I was silent. I lifted my hands. And still, I was cuffed." This wasn't an investigation. This was character assassination with a clipboard and a badge. 2 days later, an anonymous post hit the local forums. His address, where he worked, a photo of his kids. And that was where diplomacy ended. Michael called a press conference. No permit, no publicist, just a man with a voice, a camera pointed at him, and nothing left to lose. He didn't shout. He didn't dramatize. He didn't need to. "They told me I was the problem," he said, voice steady as a heartbeat. "But the problem is a system that sees a helping hand as a threat, a state where kindness gets handcuffed, a silence that's expected every time we cry out." People stood. They clapped, some cried, a few just listened, their hearts racing with the rhythm of recognition. 20 minutes after the live stream ended, he got a call from City Council. "Mr. Brooks, we'd like to speak with you regarding policy reforms." He hung up because 5 minutes later there was a knock on his door. The woman, the same one whose car he fixed. She wasn't alone. With her stood an attorney, tall, confident, and clearly ready for war. "We want to file a lawsuit," the woman said, "on your behalf and mine. We don't want apologies. We want accountability." Michael looked at her. Really looked. "You sure about this?" he asked. She lifted her chin. "I live alone. I get nervous every time I see flashing lights. But if you're willing to stand, I can walk beside you." He nodded, not because he was fearless, but because now he wasn't alone. This is the moment. Everything you've waited for, right here. Stay tuned to see how Michael turns the tables and forces the system to face itself. 3 weeks. That's how long this storm had dragged him through the mud, and not once did it pause. Not for breath, not for mercy. Every single day, Michael caught himself wondering if maybe it would have been easier to stay quiet. Bite down, keep the peace, let the moment pass. But every time his daughter looked up at him with those big questioning eyes and asked, "Daddy, you're strong, right?" He knew retreat wasn't just cowardice. It was betrayal. Of her, of himself, of every man who'd ever been told to keep his head down and his voice low. He wasn't eating much. He wasn't sleeping. But he wasn't angry anymore either. The anger had burned itself out. What was left behind was something colder, harder, steel. the kind that forms in a man only when he's pushed to the edge and decides there's no further to go, only forward. So there he stood, in front of the city courthouse, as the early morning wind tugged at the sleeves of the suit he bought back when he landed his first real job. The briefcase in his hand wasn't expensive, but it was heavy with purpose. His expression? Calm. But the kind of calm that meant business. That meant, I'm not here to ask, I'm here to demand. The steps of the courthouse were already filled, not with cameras or TV vans, but with people. Real people. Older black men from the church, standing with dignity like they'd seen this fight before. Young mothers with children holding handmade signs that read things like, "Helping is not a crime, and justice has a name, Michael Brooks." College students live streaming on their phones. And next to all of them, standing tall in a burgundy blazer that screamed both elegance and defiance, was the elderly woman Michael had helped, and her attorney. The flag over the courthouse fluttered stiffly in the wind. Today, for once, it didn't feel like decoration. It felt earned. Inside, the courtroom was cold, not just from the air conditioning, but from the sterile silence of institutional indifference. The judge looked like a man who had been waiting for retirement, like it was salvation. The opposing side, representatives from the police department, sat rigid in suits, faces set, hiding behind folders and a PowerPoint deck labeled Procedure Review. And Michael stood alone. No stack of notes, no legal team, just his voice, just the truth. "I am an engineer," he said, voice firm but not raised. "A father, a citizen, a man who saw a stranger in trouble and stopped to help. And for that, for the act of being decent while black, I was forced to the ground, handcuffed, treated like a threat." The room held its breath. You could hear a pin drop. The only sound was the soft whisper of the old woman in the first row. "Speak, son." So he did. This case isn't about a wrench. It's not about a misunderstanding. This is about a system that looks at men like me and doesn't see a neighbor or a good Samaritan. It sees danger. It's about streets where kindness can get you arrested and where being the wrong color in the right place makes you suspicious by default. One of the police department's attorneys, clearly uncomfortable, tried to interrupt. "Mr. Brooks, with all due respect," Michael cut in, sharp as glass. "That's not respect. That's rehearsed tolerance. Let's call it what it is. And no, this isn't an opinion. This is lived experience. You don't log my trauma in spreadsheets because it doesn't come with a case number. But that doesn't mean it didn't happen." The judge didn't speak, but something shifted. His eyes narrowed. His fingers stopped tapping. This wasn't a routine hearing anymore. It was history in the making. Then came the voice from the left side of the room. Civil representation. A woman whose voice could stop traffic. Hair pulled into a bun that looked sculpted by conviction. "We are asking not only for material compensation," she said, turning to face the judge, "but also for public acknowledgement of error. We are demanding a review and reform of how this city trains and deploys its police force." Then, something nobody expected. One of the officers sitting beside the attorney stood, young, nervous, barely out of academy by the look of him. His voice trembled, but his eyes were clear. "I was at that scene," he said. I can't keep quiet. We were told to establish control. We didn't ask questions. We didn't verify anything. We were trained to treat a black man with tools as a higher risk." A collective gasp moved through the room. The judge raised his gavel, but it was too late. The truth had already been spoken, and the room would never be the same. "We lost control," the officer admitted, "and I'm sorry. That didn't erase the scars, didn't restore the sleep, didn't fix the taste of injustice. But in this machine of silence, acknowledgement was a revolution." 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at Michael's door from City Hall. They wanted him to chair a newly formed committee on community and police relations. He didn't throw a party, didn't post it online. He just nodded alone in his kitchen and said quietly, "All right." Because he knew he wasn't just an engineer anymore. He wasn't just a man who'd survived an injustice. He was a voice they'd tried to ignore, but couldn't. On the day of the first committee meeting, he stepped up to the microphone, looked out at the crowd and smiled. Not the kind of smile you give when you've won, but the kind that says, "Now, we work." "I'm not here for revenge," he said. "I'm here to rewrite the rules. So the next time someone kneels beside a broken down car with a wrench in hand, they get to go home, not go on record." He looked out into the audience and saw his daughter in the front row, smiling, proud. And in that moment, he knew every sleepless night, every insult, every humiliation had been worth it. Because justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks in quietly, wearing a suit from a first job, holding nothing but truth. Sometimes the road to justice starts with a wrench and ends with a microphone. And once that voice is heard, it never stops echoing.